Hello everyone. So I'm making this video to discuss what I think is the most interesting thing one can do. But of course, I will not just say it like this. We are going to kind of go through it and let's say think together why I believe it's like this and if we all agree. So I I think there are three stages, let's say three groups of things that one can do. Um, I will first summarize and then we will go into detail. So the first one is, let's say, going for stories, following stories. The second is following preferences. And the third is, I will call it maybe self-awareness, cognizance, introspection. There isn't really a specific word, but I will elaborate more and explain. So in the first step, we are conditioned by stories about what is important, what is good, what is wrong, and we follow those stories. Now, those stories can be about what should be, how the world should be, again, what is good, what is bad, what is right, what is wrong, what we should be, what would be better, stuff like this. It can be about identity, about should, about many things, but they are all stories. So they are mental conditioning. So they are beliefs and assumptions that we have that are not based on anything. So they are mental conditionings. And so I think the least interesting thing we can do, that is the least interesting thing to live our life, is to try to validate those stories, to fulfill those stories. Now, unfortunately, that's what most people are doing. Because in order to stop doing this, you have to, let's say, in quotes, reach enlightenment, which would mean nothing more than like drop the conditioned mind. So get rid of the mental conditionings. Like, for example, believing that one has to be a good person. And so build this story about being a good person and then how exactly is supposed to be a good person, what he should do to be a good person. It's always about what you should do to be. So it's the story is you should do X to be Y. And you believe that it's good to be Y. It makes you feel important. So even, for example, someone that is going to, let's say, choose pain, but he may actually feel good about it. How? So you may, let's say, you decide to be a monk, to abstain from every pleasure, from everything, but that makes you feel special, that makes you feel important, that gives you an illusion, a story that your life is meaningful, whatever meaningful means. And so you completely jump into a story. You just try to fulfill a story. You tell yourself a story about yourself and you feel good about the story. So you live in a complete illusion, let's say, in a complete story. Let's try to make a simple example. Just I think so. I'm going to say something that maybe everyone can relate to. It's a mental exercise. It's a mental experiment we are going to do. Imagine that you are just some normal person. Let's say you work at McDonald's, so you get probably average salary, and you live in a normal city somewhere, like maybe not a huge city. You're middle class or below average salary. You're a completely normal person. You go to the supermarket, you buy your food, you cook. But then there is something special about you. And let's say like you have a superpower. But it's a superpower, let's say, that you cannot use for yourself. You can only use it for others. And you cannot tell anyone. So it's secret. Only you know you have this superpower. You cannot tell anyone or you lose it. And you can only use it for others. And let's say the superpower is, well, I remember like seeing a cartoon. I think it was called Death Note. Death Note. It's like a Japanese cartoon where some guy had the power to write someone's name in a booklet and that person will die. And if I remember correctly, it was kind of killing bad guys. But it doesn't have to be that. The superpower can be this, that maybe there is a notebook where you write names and that person suddenly dies. But it could also be that maybe that person heals. So whatever disease they have, they heal. Imagine that you have an immense power on other people and you could either use it to kill people. In that case, he was killing bad people, I think, whatever bad means. But again, uh, or you could heal people. So you will spend your day watching, let's say, the news, and they say you see, oh, this person got cancer and he has 3 children and he's a very good guy and blah blah blah. And so you write his name in the list of the people to heal, and poof, instantly they say, miracle, is completely healed. But no one knows it's you. You cannot tell anyone, and you cannot get any benefit from it. So you cannot heal yourself if you have a problem. And potentially you could also have the death note power. So let's say someone is like horrible, and you think he's really an evil person. You just write his name, and let's say within a few days he gets some disease and dies, or dies into an accident. So it also, it doesn't just die. I think in Death Note they kind of die. I'm not sure. I don't really remember. But in this case, no one, there is no one can suspect that it's you. It's like they will just, maybe the person you dislike, you just write their name and they will get a cancer and die after a few years. There is just no way to know it's you. And the person you like, you write their name and they have cancer, and say maybe they find a cure, or they realize it was a medical error. It's whatever. It's like kind of magic. So you have this magical power that you can write people's name, um, and you can either save them or hurt them, basically. But no one can know it's you. You cannot get anything out of it, and you cannot benefit yourself. So you cannot heal yourself or hurt yourself. You can only do it to others. And let's say you cannot even do it to your close friends or your family. You can only do it to strangers, complete strangers. So you will spend your time watching TV and seeing people, and when you see a really evil person, you write his name in the bad notebook so that they die. And when you see a person that you think is really good and is sick or has some problem, you write his name, and it could even be that he's very poor, he lost everything, and then he wins the lottery. You can influence other people's lives, but you cannot benefit from it. Now, in theory, that should make absolutely no difference to you, because it cannot benefit you in any way. So you just wake up in the morning, work at McDonald's, pay your rent, and that's your life. It's a normal life. But then, let's say from 6 p.m. to midnight, you watch the news and you write names. That's kind of your passion, the thing you do. But you don't benefit. Now, would you rather be the person that has this special power, or the person that doesn't? Because this special power is not going to benefit you in any way. But still, it makes you feel like special, powerful, whatever. So you feel like you're big, you're a big shot, you're someone, you matter, you're special. You watch the news and you write names, and then you see that it happens. But you don't benefit. I mean, you're still working at McDonald's, it's tiring, you get like average wage, you pay your rent, you never really manage to save money. You cook yourself, like maybe cheap food, you cannot really go to good restaurants, you cannot travel. You're just a normal person, but you have this superpower. But would you rather be the person with that superpower, or let's say maybe you rather be, let's say, a lawyer or a surgeon? So now it's a different life. You make more money. You can enjoy like going to restaurants, traveling. You probably are on upper class level. Let's say you make a few hundred K salary as a surgeon or a lawyer, but you don't have the superpower. But remember, the superpower cannot affect you in any way. It's just the fact that you know that you have it. Possibly a lot of people will choose to be working at McDonald's and have the superpower, rather than, let's say, being the lawyer or the surgeon and not have the superpower. But the superpower cannot really affect you in any way. It's just a story. I mean, well, in that case, you know that it's a little bit real. But, and again, we have to consider some other points, because in this case, maybe you really like helping others or potentially hurting others. So a lot of people will choose potentially the superpower. Now, the motivation can change, of course. So some will choose the superpower because it makes them feel unique and special. Some, so that will be kind of a story. Some because it will make them feel powerful, and that's really all they care. The feeling to be powerful, the story to tell themselves they are powerful. Because they are not really, I mean, they are powerful to others, but it cannot impact themselves. Or maybe they will genuinely love the idea of helping others. They would rather earn less money to have the potential to help or to hurt, whatever they choose. So not in this specific example, not it's not always based on a story. So if one will choose to be the, let's say, McDonald's worker with lower salary compared to the lawyer or the surgeon, because you cannot benefit from it. So if they choose to be the McDonald's guy with average salary, it depends the motivation. So it's not necessarily about a story. So if they choose to feel powerful, it's a story. They want to tell themselves that they are powerful, that they are special. If they are doing, again, just to feel special, unique, whatever, powerful, it's a story. If, however, they genuinely, let's say, want to help or hurt, but if they want to hurt, it's probably a story too, because I explained this in the previous video about if we should do good things. So it's like when you help someone, when you do something good, if it's not because of a story, because of course it can be because of a story, you believe you have to be the good guy, that makes you a great person to be good, blah, 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 blah. So if you're doing it for a story. But if you're not doing it for a story, so basically if you're doing it for a story, you could equally, let's say, feel good by either hurting other people or helping other people. It just depends what your story is. So if your story is that you want to be you are a good guy, you're a great guy, you're a very helpful person, very generous person, so you will help others to fulfill your story, to validate your story. But if your story can just be that you're powerful, that you're great, you're amazing, you're superior, and then you could as well hurt or help, as long as it validates your story that you are better than others, that you're more powerful, you're superior, then if you fulfill, you could very well hurt other people or help other people. Both will validate your story if your story is to be powerful, to be superior, to be better than other people, to be unique, let's say, because of extra power. So depends what your story is. Or if your story is that in general people are evil and you should punish them, then you will validate your and you are great because you are the punisher, then you will hurt other people and that will validate your story. So if you have a story, potentially anything can make you feel good. It just depends if it validates your story or not. But if you have dropped the story and there is no story and it's a direct preference, then if there is no story, it's very unlikely. I don't even think it's possible that you will enjoy hurting someone else, because the only case in which you can enjoy hurting someone else is if there is a story that makes you feel good because of it. Because in theory, there is no way you can feel good. Well, there is no way you can feel good directly by hurting someone else unless there is a story about it. Most of the time, the same is true for helping. So helping someone else will only make you feel good if there is a story. It's the same, except the fact that if there is no story at all, which is rare because most people live in a conditioned mind, they have not yet removed the stories. So, but if you remove the stories, you can potentially also feel good about helping others without a story. So not really because you're building some kind of identity story where you tell yourself you're a good guy, you're better, whatever, but just because you have developed enough self-awareness that you can empathize, you can connect with the person you're helping, and so you can indirectly feel, you can see from their perspective. So when you give something to them, you can feel their perspective when they receive, so they feel happy, and you can feel some of that happiness back. But that doesn't work when you hurt people. So when you have the stories, you could potentially feel good both by helping or hurting others, because it depends what your story is. But both have the hurting and helping others, both have the potential to validate certain stories and make you feel good because of that story. But once you drop the story, it's unlikely that hurting someone is going to make you feel good, because why, if there is no story? However, helping someone can make you feel good if you have developed enough self-awareness that you can imagine yourself at the place of the other person. You can imagine the perspective of the other person. You can see the world through their eyes, and so you can also feel them receiving, and so you can feel some of the joy and happiness that they receive, and it comes back to you. So again, in the example of the superpower, some people will choose potentially to be the surgeon or the lawyer and make more money and not have the superpower, so they will have a more comfortable life but not have the superpower. Others may choose to have the superpower, but there are two possible reasons for choosing the superpower, especially if we are talking about the superpower to help. So some will choose the superpower because of a story, because they like to feel powerful, special, etc. So they will choose the superpower because it will validate their story that they are unique and special and whatever. But others, if they have removed the conditioned mind, they got rid of the conditioning, they don't have any story, so they have dropped the story, they could still choose the superpower because they genuinely like the idea of helping. They can kind of feel back. They have developed enough self-awareness that they can see the world through the eyes of the person who received the help, and they can indirectly feel good because of that. Um, so I went a little bit, I sidetracked a little bit here, but I wanted to try to give an example to show that those stories are very, very important. And a lot of people are going to choose the story, like people may choose to die for their story. So it's like maybe some people will choose to go to war, to fight a war because they want to be heroes, they want glory, and they're okay of dying for the glory or for the respect. So sometimes losing your identity could be worse than death if you really care about. So some people may rather die than feel a certain degree of shame, but shame is also about a story. um, Usually it's self-shame. Sometimes it can be other people shaming you, which could be painful also even without a story, because they kind of push you away. But a lot of it is self-inflicted. um, so in general, stories, especially stories about identity, but not only about identity, can be very powerful. And very often stories are the motivation for most things. So I must become rich because I have to prove to me and to others that I'm worthy, that I'm good. I want to prove to my parents that I'm a great guy. Or I have to become important or powerful or famous, or so that I deserve to be loved, or whatever. Those stories can get very complicated. And for most people, the motivation of our actions are for those stories, to fulfill those stories. And people may very well be willing to die or to lose everything they have just for the story. Like, let's say someone that decides to renounce everything, to give away all his possessions because he thinks that makes him a better person. So it's not even about helping. When someone say giving away possession, it's not even saying giving to that specific person that needs because they need. It's giving away because they don't want it, because they want to feel that they did something very unique that no one really has the courage to do, to give away everything, to renounce everything, because now they are more morally superior, spiritually superior, they are special. They want to feel unique and special. So yeah, they have lost everything and they spend all their day in a small temple to meditate, or but they feel special. They feel superior than others. So they are willing to lose everything for that story, to validate that story, that they are unique, they are superior, they are more spiritual, they are more holy, they are not materialistic, they are good guys, they are the best, they are unique, special, blah, 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 blah. Or die for a story, like going to a war or whatever. So most people live their life in those stories. And I think this is the least interesting thing to do. It's the least interesting kind of life, living for the stories. Then we have the next step. So let's say you have dropped the stories, no more stories, you have dropped the conditioned mind, you have reached enlightenment, in quotes, um, and now there are no more stories. So now you're confronted directly with reality. So you see reality in front of you, and you interact with reality without filter. The filter was the stories. So what appears then? What do you do? What happens next? You basically follow your preferences. So you then realize that you have some actual preference. Let's call them first degree preference, to the direct preferences. The preference that come from the story, we can call them like second degree preference, indirect preferences. But you, now that you got rid of the stories, you can realize your direct preference, what you actually like, without the distortion of the stories. Maybe you like to relax a lot and go fishing and sleep a lot and eat certain foods and have lots of sex and take certain drugs and watch certain kind of movies. You don't need to tell yourself that you are great or to achieve anything, because the stories are gone. I mean, if you find it interesting to take on certain challenges, why not? If you find it enjoyable, fulfilling, you like it. But there is no more story. There is no story that you must do it, you have to do it, it's important that you do it. All those are gone. You're just interacting, let's say, with reality by doing whatever you prefer. You're kind of a lot more free. You're free from the conditioned mind, and you discover your preferences. And your preference, again, can be very simple stuff. It can be gardening or eating certain foods, resting a lot, reading books. Clearly, there is no ambition. There is no need to prove yourself. There is to yourself or to others. There is no need to be someone or to be something. You just do what you like. And what you like can include, for example, helping other people. Because when you help someone else, you may have developed enough self-awareness by the point you have dropped all the stories that you can feel a little bit their point of view. So if you help them, you can feel maybe the joy, the happiness of the person receiving the help. So it makes you happy. So you do it. But just for that, just because it makes you feel good, you just do whatever makes you feel good. Now, of course, you're still cognizant. You still think about the consequences. You know that certain things you cannot do. I mean, you cannot eat too much ice cream. You will become obese or get diabetes. So you will still be careful. I mean, you are still aware of consequences. It doesn't mean you're stupid. But there are no stories. You just follow your preferences. And that could be an enjoyable thing to do. Um, the problem with this second step, in my opinion, is that it can become a little bit boring because everything may feel like it's just a way of killing time. It's just a pastime, like doing the crosswords. You got rid of the stories, but now you're just killing time. I mean, at least you're aware of it. So you're not just doing crazy stuff just to fulfill your stories, but you're just killing time. It's like just like doing crosswords all day. Because nothing seems to be meaningful, nothing seems to be important, nothing is a big deal. There is nothing that you must do. All those stories are gone. So all is left is preferences. But then you're like, yeah, and any preference is equal as another preference. So it can feel like you're just killing time. So it can get a little bit boring. And so, what is the third then? The third step? The third step is introspection, is, is realizing that there is something that is really, really interesting to do, and is developing your awareness, your self awareness, your ability to do introspection, your cognition of things, your cognizance. I mean, I'm using many words just to try to explain the idea because it's difficult to say in a single word. It's the idea to be aware, to be being aware intended as not in some metaphysical sense, but intended as, for example, understanding your motivations when you do things, understanding the implications of what you're going to do, understanding maybe the deep motivations, understanding the why you do things, and how it's going to unfold. Um, and this is very interesting because it's kind of the opposite of the stories. So in the stories, there are some illusions, those stories, and you try to fulfill those illusions. Whereas here you dig deep inside yourself, you dig deep in your mind, in your unconscious, and you really try to understand why you do things, what makes you tick, what is the reason. You kind of live a, a life that you understand. It's like understanding. So you understand what is going on. You are more mature, you're more aware. Is a life of understanding, and this is more interesting than just the preference. Now, I'm not saying that this does not replace the preference. This is kind of in addition to the preference. So you have your preference, of course, the things you enjoy doing, but you also have something interesting. So as you go for your preferences, you also wonder, why this preference? Why not this preference? How do I feel when I do that? How do I feel when someone tell me something? How do I feel when this happens? And you learn more about yourself. It's a process of knowing yourself. It's a process of introspection. So it's not about knowing in general. It's not about knowing like a lot of facts about history or economy or business, which is more dry. It's about knowing yourself. You learn to know yourself. you learn to look inside yourself, and you learn, you kind of, you could say you grow. I'm not sure what that means. You grow, you evolve. That's not a great word. You develop. But we can relate to this. It's like we know that we are not kids anymore. We can tell there is a difference in terms of maturity or awareness about reality or self-awareness between us now and when we were kids. And it's not black and white, it's not children and adults. It's a process that can continue. Of course, it's important not to get lost into those stories, because those stories can lead us to a path where we get lost. So, but once we get rid of the stories, maybe there is an initial state where we just kind of go for the preferences, but that could get a little bit boring if you just go for the preference, because eventually it feels like everything is just killing time. But if in combination, of course, you still go for your preference, but at the same time you spend time observing yourself, looking into yourself, thinking about your motivation, why you do things, and you learn more about yourself. You become more self-aware, you become more cognizant, you understand yourself more. And I don't know what name to give to this process. That's why I just use a lot of words, so no one gets stuck to a specific word. So cognizance, self-awareness, awareness, maturity, growth, evolution, development, whatever word we want. But it's about introspection. It's about the ability to look inside yourself and see something ideally that is real, not a story, to see something, to understand yourself better. And this process is very interesting because you kind of live a life where you're actually aware. So the opposite of being unaware will be just following blindly the stories. And the stories are your master and you're the servant of the stories. But you don't want that. You want to understand yourself. Of course, you still follow the preference, but at the same time, you can follow the preference and understand yourself. And I think this is the most interesting thing. So it's the understanding yourself is the path to becoming more aware. Um, so let's look again at the three. So the first one is the stories. And a metaphor I would like to use is like a storm. So you can imagine that you're a small boat in a big, big storm, and you always get it's always shaking and whatever. Um, and the reason is because when you follow stories, it's like your map of the world often is incoherent, because what maybe there is one story when you do a specific action, according to one story it's good, according to another story it's bad. So there are also contradictions between the stories, and those stories, they can massively amplificate certain good stuff and massively amplificate bad stuff. So let's say you win the lottery, you think you're a genius and you're blessed by God and you're the chosen one, so it massively amplifies the pleasure of winning the lottery. And then you break your leg, now God hates you, you are a bad person, why are you getting punished? And so it's much, much worse. So you get those huge amplifications. So no events like, because events acquire a meaning. So you win the lottery, it's not just that you win the lottery, it means something. It means you're great, you're amazing, blah 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 blah. And you break your leg or you lose money or whatever, it's not just that you lost money or break your leg, it means something. It's like God doesn't love you anymore, he forgot about you, or the universe hates you, or what's wrong with you, what did you do to deserve this, maybe in a previous life you were a horrible person, you're being punished, blah 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 blah. And so it amplifies negatively. So when you live in the stories, everything is massively amplified, and it probably feels like being in a constant storm. Also because some stories are contradictory. So according to one story, what you're doing is good, but according to another story, what you're doing is bad. So it's a terrible place to be. So when you drop, and that's what Buddha calls the suffering, as in the second dart, the commentary, the stories that we add on top of what happens. And we also call it the mental conditioning. Once you drop the stories, the mental conditioning, then it feels like a desert. So it's just desert. There is nothing, because the turn the storm is gone. It's there is no, you're just it's just a big desert, and you follow your preference, but it can feel very flat. The amplifications are gone. It's like if you win the lottery, yeah, it's great. You break your leg, it's painful. It's very flat. Oh, chocolate ice cream, great. There is no story anymore. There is no amplification, because the story what was amplifying. So the amplification effect is gone because there is no story. So it feels a little bit flat, a little bit dry. It feels a little bit like killing time. And I'm not sure what will be the metaphor for the third one, the one of the self-awareness, where now you focus on growing your awareness. But in a very practical way, I'm not saying awareness in some mystical or metaphysical sense, really just knowing yourself better, understanding your motivations, what makes you tick, why you do things. So just introspection. You spend time doing introspection. So you follow your preference, but at the same time you do some introspection. And I guess the metaphor could be a desert. It's a lot more calm, but with an oasis inside, and maybe you just go with your boat on the lake or in the oasis. So they're not the huge waves. Um, so yeah, maybe it's less intense. Possibly it's less intense because this intensity was the result of an illusion. So it's less intense, but it's more real. So it's not the same, because before it was extremely intense, but false. Now it's a little bit less intense. So even the spikes up are less intense, because if you win the lottery, you just say that you're lucky. You don't say that you're unique and special and God loves you and you're the chosen one because God made you win the lottery because you deserve it, because you're amazing. Of course, you cannot reach that level, but those, they don't last anyway. They just quickly go down. But of course, when you break your leg, you just say, shit, I broke my leg. You don't say, oh, that's horrible. Like, what did I do to deserve this? Probably I'm a horrible person, blah, blah, blah. I'm getting punished. So, of course, you will not get the same degree of amplification that you got with the stories. But what you get is more real. So it's less intense, but it's more real, because it's the result of a direct interaction between, let's say, you and reality, or let's say the distinction between you and reality is also stupid because you are part of reality. But whatever, the point is there is no filter. So it's you and reality without a filter. So it's clearly more real because the filter is removed, so it has to be more real. But it's less intense, so more real but less intense. The other one is more intense but false. But the intensity can be good but also bad. It can be positive intensity, like you feel very good or you feel very bad. But it's also false. So it's more like an extreme intensity, like, let's say, doing a very strong drug. But whereas the other one is more like being able to go deeper, to appreciate the texture. Let's say the first one will be the intensity of, I've never tried and I don't recommend anyone to try. But let's say someone doing drugs, like, let's say, heroin. So maybe I don't know what they feel like, but I assume it's very powerful. So someone could feel extremely good and it's extremely intense. But it doesn't have a texture, a depth. It's just intense. Just like intense pain, you can have intense pain and intense pleasure, but it's kind of very shallow. It's intense, but it's very shallow. It's not deep. It doesn't have a texture. It doesn't. It's not. It lose a little bit of how you say. Um, a lot of subtleties are gone. So it's like. So this would, let's say, the amplification you feel through the stories could feel like either intense pain, like breaking your leg, or intense pleasure, like using some drugs. But the one you feel on the other side, when you have dropped the stories and you start to get into, so you are interacting directly with reality without a filter, um, and you have developed some self-awareness, it feels more rich, it feels more deep, it has more texture. It's less intense, but it will be more, let's say, tasting a delicious meal, a meal that maybe you can appreciate its texture, its rich flavor, its subtle taste, different subtle tastes that mix together. So it's less intense than the pain of breaking your leg or the pleasure of using a drug, but it's much more rich and subtle and with texture. It's much more interesting. So the metaphor would be a desert with maybe an oasis, a lake, and you are going with your boat. It's less intense, but it's much more rich. So yes, you don't have those huge waves in the lake, in the oasis, with your small boat, but when you look in the lake, you can see the fish and you can You will never look at the fish in the storm. You're scared for your life. It's very intense, but it's just intense. It's not deep or rich or whatever. Whereas the calm lake, you're going on the calm lake and you see the fish and you look at the fish and every fish is slightly different and you can see their colors and blah, 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 blah. So it's a much richer experience. It's more interesting. It has more, there is more to, it's deeper. It's more rich. Um, and it doesn't have this element of boring in the case where there is just the dessert, where it's kind of flat because it's just like killing time, because you're just following preferences, because the stories are gone. Because here, yes, the stories are gone in the case, but then there is always this endless possibility of knowing yourself more. So you can always discover something new about yourself, how you operate, what motivates you, etc., etc. So it's kind of, there is a path, there is a path where you can keep going, and every day you can discover more about yourself while you're also going for your preferences without the distortion of the stories. um, so this will be the idea. um, so step one is the idea that you are lost in your stories, and it's very intense, but it's not deep and it's not rich, and it's often painful. And then you drop the stories, and what is left is the preferences, but it can feel a little bit flat, like a dessert, a little bit dry and flat, a little bit boring, because you feel you're just killing time, but at least you don't have the stories. And then you start to think, you start to look inside yourself, you start to develop more self-awareness, and you realize that there is infinite potential in how much you can know yourself. There is no limit, there is no end goal, there is no point where you reach a maximum, that's it, that's the maximum amount you can know yourself. That doesn't happen. You can always know yourself a little bit better. So now you pursue this, and I think that's the most interesting thing, the pursuit of knowing yourself more, knowing yourself better, while at the same time you of course enjoy your preferences. Because when it's just preferences, it can get a little bit dry and boring. But once you discover that there still is that direction in which to go, not that it has to be meaningful, because meaningful is a story, but it's something that the more you know yourself, the better your experience is. And you can keep doing it, you can keep knowing yourself better, and the more you become self-aware, the better your experience is. At the end, dropping the stories is just one milestone of self-awareness. So it's kind of the first big milestone. So before, when there are all those stories, your self-awareness is low and you're lost in the stories. Then you develop enough self-awareness to drop the stories, but then you realize that this was just a milestone, and you can continue developing more self-awareness, and there is no limit to how much self-awareness you can develop. And I think that's the most interesting thing.